Have you ever noticed how the people who chase happiness the most seem to be the most miserable? While those who appear truly content have something almost dangerous about them, something unpredictable, something that makes others both fascinated and slightly afraid. They don't smile to please, they don't perform joy for validation. They simply exist with a quiet intensity that commands respect without demanding it. What if I told you that your desperate pursuit of happiness is exactly what's keeping you weak, predictable, and ultimately unfulfilled? What if the secret to a truly powerful life lies not in seeking pleasure, but in embracing something far more subversive? Michel de Montaigne, the 16th century French philosopher, who revolutionized how we think about the human condition, discovered something that modern society desperately wants to hide from you. He realized that happiness, as we've been taught to pursue it, is a trap, a gilded cage that keeps you running in circles while your soul slowly withers away. Montaigne wrote, "The most manifest sign of wisdom is a continual cheerfulness." But here's what most people miss. He wasn't talking about the fake cheerfulness of someone trying to convince themselves they're happy. He was talking about the deep contentment that comes from accepting the full spectrum of human experience, including its darkness, its pain, its beautiful danger. Think about this. When you're constantly trying to be happy, what are you really doing? You're avoiding everything that makes life real, everything that has depth, everything that could transform you. You're living like a tourist in your own existence, always looking for the next pleasant experience, the next dopamine hit, the next moment of temporary satisfaction that will inevitably fade and leave you hungrier than before. But when you stop chasing happiness and start embracing what Montaigne called the art of living dangerously, everything changes. You stop being a consumer of experiences and become a creator of meaning. This isn't about becoming reckless or destructive. This is about something far more sophisticated and infinitely more powerful. This is about developing what Montaigne discovered in his own life: the courage to face uncertainty, to question everything, to live authentically even when it makes others uncomfortable, especially when it makes others uncomfortable. Because the moment you stop trying to be happy and start being real, you become dangerous to a system that profits from your dissatisfaction. Dangerous to people who need you to be predictable. Dangerous to yourself in the best possible way. You see, happiness as sold to you by society is a product. It's something external that you're supposed to acquire, achieve, or maintain. But what Montaigne understood, what he spent his entire life exploring, is that true fulfillment comes not from pursuing pleasure, but from developing what he called the capacity to be alone with yourself, without despair. This is revolutionary because it means your well-being is no longer dependent on circumstances, on other people's approval, on the endless cycle of wanting and getting and wanting more. But here's where it gets dangerous. When you stop needing happiness, you become unpredictable. When you're not driven by the desperate need to feel good, you start making decisions based on principles, on truth, on what actually matters, rather than what feels comfortable in the moment. You become someone who can say no to things others can't resist. Someone who can walk away from situations that others cling to out of fear. Someone who can stand alone when everyone else is following the crowd. Montaigne spent years in his tower, away from the politics and social games of his time. Not because he was antisocial, but because he understood that most of human interaction is based on mutual delusion. People pretending to be happy, pretending to have answers, pretending to be someone they're not, just to maintain the comfortable lies that keep society functioning. But when you stop pretending, when you stop performing, when you embrace what he called the courage to be ignorant, you become a mirror that reflects back the emptiness of these social games, and that makes you dangerous. Your pursuit of happiness has been keeping you trapped in a cycle of dependence. You depend on others for validation, on circumstances for satisfaction, on the future for fulfillment. But Montaigne discovered that the moment you accept that happiness is not the goal, that life is not about feeling good but about experiencing fully, you break free from this dependence. You become sovereign over your own experience. And sovereignty is perhaps the most dangerous quality a person can possess in a world designed to keep you enslaved to external validation. But let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this. How long will you continue to chase a mirage that always disappears just as you think you've reached it? How long will you let the promise of future happiness steal the richness of your present moment? Maybe it is time to stop running toward something that was never real and start walking the dangerous path of authentic existence. Because when you stop trying to be happy, you might just discover something infinitely more valuable. You might discover how to be truly alive. You've been conditioned from birth to believe that the goal of life is to be happy. That anything that doesn't produce immediate pleasure or satisfaction is something to be avoided, escaped, or medicated away. Your education system rewarded you for being compliant and cheerful. Your family praised you when you smiled and stayed quiet about what really bothered. Your society told you that success means accumulating enough resources and experiences to maintain a constant state of contentment. But Montaigne saw through this lie 500 years ago, and he paid a price for his insight that most people are not willing to pay. This obsession with happiness is not a natural human instinct. It's a manufactured desire that serves systems of control. When you're constantly chasing the next high, the next achievement, the next relationship, the next purchase that will finally make you happy, you're not living your life, you're being lived by forces outside your control. You become predictable, manageable, profitable. Your desires can be anticipated and exploited. Your fears can be triggered and monetized. Your hopes can be packaged and sold back to you at a premium. But Montaigne discovered something that changed everything for him. He realized that the pursuit of happiness was actually making him profoundly unhappy. The more he chased pleasure, the more elusive it became. The more he tried to avoid pain, the more sensitive he became to even minor discomforts. The more he sought external validation, the more dependent he became on others' opinions. So he made a radical decision. He stopped trying to be happy and started trying to be honest. This honesty, this willingness to look directly at reality without the filter of wishful thinking, is what makes someone dangerous. Because when you're not invested in maintaining pleasant illusions, you see things as they really are. You see through the pretenses that others desperately need to maintain. You recognize the games people play to avoid confronting their own emptiness. You become immune to the manipulation tactics that work on people who are still desperately seeking happiness from external sources. Montaigne wrote, "I prefer to be old for a shorter time than to be old before my time." And what he meant is that most people spend their entire lives in a kind of emotional childhood, always looking for someone or something else to make them feel good, never developing the inner resources to face life's inevitable difficulties with grace and strength. This emotional immaturity might feel safer, but it comes at a terrible cost. It makes you vulnerable to anyone who promises you the happiness you're seeking. When you base your decisions on what will make you happy, you become easy to predict and therefore easy to control. Political systems know exactly which promises will get your vote. Marketing teams know exactly which products will capture your attention. Toxic people know exactly which buttons to push to get the reaction they want from you. Your happiness seeking is like a remote control that others can use to steer your life in directions that serve their interests rather than yours. But when you stop chasing happiness, something extraordinary happens. You develop what Montaigne called the strength to be disliked. You're no longer willing to compromise your values for approval. No longer willing to stay in situations that drain your soul, just because leaving would be temporarily uncomfortable. No longer willing to pretend to be someone not just to maintain relationships that were never real in the first place. This is where the danger begins. Not danger to others, but danger to the systems and relationships that depend on your willingness to sacrifice your authenticity for the illusion of happiness. When you're no longer motivated by the need to feel good, you become capable of choices that others find incomprehensible. You can walk away from jobs that pay well but crush your spirit. You can end relationships that look perfect from the outside but feel empty from within. You can say no to opportunities that everyone else thinks you should want. The people around you will not understand this transformation at first. They'll think you've become negative, depressed, or difficult. They'll try to convince you to return to your old ways of seeking happiness, because your new authenticity makes them uncomfortable about their own compromises. They'll tell you that you're overthinking, that you should just try to enjoy life, that you're making things too complicated. But what they're really saying is that your refusal to play the happiness game threatens their need to believe that the game is worth playing. And this is exactly where Montaigne's wisdom becomes most valuable. He understood that the path of authentic living is necessarily a lonely path, at least at first. When you stop performing happiness, you lose access to the superficial connections that are based on mutual pretense. But you gain something infinitely more valuable, the possibility of relationships based on truth. Connections that don't require you to hide parts of yourself. Interactions that nourish rather than drain your essential nature. But we're just getting started. In the next part, we need to understand what Montaigne discovered about the relationship between danger and freedom. Because once you stop trying to be happy, you enter a territory that most people never explore, a place where your choices are truly your own, where your life becomes an expression of your deepest values, rather than a reaction to external pressures. And that's when you discover the secret that society doesn't want you to know, that freedom and danger are not opposites, they're the same thing. Montaigne understood something about human psychology that modern self-help culture refuses to acknowledge. That the pursuit of safety and comfort is actually the most dangerous way to live. Not dangerous in an obvious way, not dangerous in a way that triggers immediate alarm, but dangerous in the subtle, soul-destroying way that slowly erodes your capacity for authentic experience. Until you wake up one day and realize you've been sleepwalking through your own life. When you organize your existence around avoiding discomfort, around maintaining a steady state of mild contentment, around minimizing risks and maximizing predictable pleasures, you create what Montaigne called the prison of false security. You think you're being smart, practical, responsible. But what you're actually doing is guaranteeing that you'll never discover what you're truly capable of. Never test the depths of your own resilience. Never experience the profound satisfaction that comes from facing uncertainty with courage. This is why Montaigne chose to embrace what he called the profitable uncertainty of existence. Instead of trying to control outcomes, he learned to find fascination in the unpredictability of life. Instead of seeking guarantee, he developed comfort with ambiguity. Instead of pursuing happiness, he pursued experience. All experience, including the difficult, painful, and transformative experiences that most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. This shift in perspective is what makes someone truly dangerous, not to others, but to the forces that profit from human weakness. When you're no longer afraid of being uncomfortable, you become immune to most forms of manipulation. When you're no longer desperate for approval, you can't be controlled through shame or social pressure. When you're no longer attached to specific outcomes, you can't be held hostage by threats or promises. Think about the people in your life who seem to possess this quality, this dangerous authenticity. They're not necessarily the loudest or most aggressive people. They're often quiet, thoughtful, present in a way that makes others both drawn to them and slightly unsettled by them. They seem to operate by different rules, to be motivated by different desires, to be playing a different game entirely. And when you're around them, you get a glimpse of what it might feel like to live without the constant need for external validation. These people understand what Montaigne discovered through years of self-examination, that true power comes not from being able to make others happy, but from being comfortable with your own company. Not from being loved by everyone, but from being authentic with yourself. Not from avoiding all pain, but from developing the capacity to find meaning in whatever life presents to you. But here's what makes this truly dangerous. When you stop trying to be happy, you start to see how much of society is built on the collective agreement to pursue impossible dreams and avoid necessary pain. You see how the entertainment industry profits from your boredom, how the consumer economy depends on your dissatisfaction, how the political system thrives on your fear and hope in equal measure. You become an outsider, not by choice but by clarity. And outsiders are always dangerous to systems that depend on universal participation in collective delusions. Montaigne wrote, "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself." And this belonging to yourself is perhaps the most revolutionary act possible in a society designed to make you belong to everything and everyone except yourself. When you belong to yourself, your time becomes your own. Your energy becomes your own. Your attention becomes your own. You're no longer a resource to be harvested by others. You're a sovereign being, making conscious choices about how to invest your life force. This sovereignty terrifies people who have built their identities around being needed, being helpful, being the source of others' happiness. It threatens relationships that were based on mutual dependence rather than mutual respect. It challenges institutions that rely on your willingness to sacrifice your authenticity for security, your individuality for belonging, your truth for harmony. But the most dangerous aspect of this transformation is what it reveals about the nature of happiness itself. When you stop chasing it, when you stop making it the measure of a life well lived, you begin to understand that happiness was never the goal, it was the distraction. The goal was always to become fully yourself, to develop your capacities to meet life's challenges. With increasing skill and grace, to contribute something meaningful to the world. Not because it makes you happy, but because it's an expression of who you are. This realization makes you dangerous, because you're no longer motivated by the same things that motivate most people. You're not working toward retirement, you're working toward mastery. You're not seeking relationships that make you feel good, you're seeking relationships that help you grow. You're not avoiding difficulties, you're developing the strength to meet them with dignity. And once you understand this, once you've tasted the freedom that comes from not needing to be happy, there's no going back. The old motivations seem hollow, the old goals seem trivial, the old fears seem like shadows that disappear when you stop running from them. This is when you discover what Montaigne called the dangerous pleasure of being yourself, and it's more addictive than any happiness you've ever chased, more satisfying than any pleasure you've ever pursued, more fulfilling than any external achievement you've ever accomplished. But with this realization comes a responsibility, because once you've seen through the happiness illusion, you have a choice to make. Will you use this insight to build a life of authentic purpose, or will you use it to become cynical and detached? This choice, this moment of decision, is what we need to explore next. Because the difference between dangerous authenticity and destructive nihilism is the difference between becoming truly alive and becoming truly lost. The moment you stop trying to be happy, you enter what Montaigne called the territory of essential questions. These are not the comfortable questions about how to get what you want, but the uncomfortable questions about whether what you want is worth wanting, not the practical questions about how to succeed, but the existential questions about what success actually means, not the social questions about how to be liked, but the solitary questions about who you are when nobody is watching. This is where most people turn back because essential questions don't have easy answers. They don't lead to quick fixes or simple solutions. They lead to more questions, deeper uncertainties, more complex understandings of what it means to be human. But Montaigne discovered that learning to be comfortable with these questions, learning to live inside uncertainty without needing to resolve it quickly, is the key to developing what he called the strength of the unfinished soul. An unfinished soul is dangerous because it's always growing, always changing, always refusing to settle into the comfortable patterns that make people predictable. It questions not just what it's told to believe, but what it wants to believe. It examines not just its failures, but its successes. It looks not just at what it lacks, but at what it might have too much of. This kind of self-examination is terrifying to people who have built their identities on fixed ideas about themselves and the world. When you stop trying to be happy, you start trying to be conscious, and consciousness is perhaps the most dangerous quality a human being can develop. Conscious people are difficult to manipulate because they're aware of their own psychological patterns. They're difficult to control because they've examined their own motivations. They're difficult to exploit because they understand the difference between their real needs and their manufactured desires. But consciousness comes with a price that most people are not willing to pay. It means giving up the comfortable illusions that make life feel simple and manageable. It means accepting responsibility not just for your actions, but for your thoughts, your emotions, your unconscious reactions. It means recognizing that you are not just the victim of circumstances, but the co-creator of your experience. And this recognition is both liberating and terrifying. Montaigne spent decades developing this consciousness, observing his own mind with the same curiosity that a scientist observes a fascinating specimen. He noticed his contradictions without trying to resolve them immediately, observed his fears without automatically trying to eliminate them, examined his desires without automatically trying to fulfill them. This process of self-observation without immediate judgment or action is what transformed him from someone seeking happiness into someone experiencing freedom. This freedom is what makes you truly dangerous. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to choose your responses consciously rather than reactively. When someone tries to provoke anger in you, you can choose whether anger serves your purposes. When someone offers you a pleasure that conflicts with your values, you can choose whether temporary satisfaction is worth long-term compromise. When circumstances pressure you to act in ways that violate your integrity, you can choose whether external approval is more important than self-respect. This kind of freedom threatens everyone who needs you to be predictable. Your family members who have built their identities around being able to trigger certain responses in you, your friends, who rely on your willingness to participate in familiar dramas, your colleagues who count on your predictable reactions to maintain the office dynamics, your romantic partners who use emotional manipulation to maintain control in the relationship. When you become conscious of these patterns and refuse to participate in them, automatically, people experience what Montaigne called the crisis of the authentic presence. They suddenly don't know how to relate to you, because you're no longer playing your assigned role in their psychological dramas. You're responding as yourself, rather than as the character they need you to be. And this forces them to confront the question of whether they actually want a relationship with you, or just with the role you've been playing. This crisis often leads to what appears to be rejection, criticism, or abandonment, but Montaigne understood that this apparent loss is actually a gift. The people who can't handle your authenticity were never really connected to you anyway. They were connected to their projection of what they needed you to be. Losing these false connections creates space for real connections. Relationships based on mutual recognition rather than mutual need. Interactions that enhance rather than diminish your essential nature. But the most dangerous aspect of this consciousness is what it reveals about the nature of choice itself. When you stop being driven by the automatic pursuit of happiness, you realize that most of what you call choice is actually compulsion. You're compelled to seek approval, compelled to avoid discomfort, compelled to maintain familiar patterns even when they're destructive. Real choice only becomes possible when you're free from these compulsions. And this freedom is so rare that it appears almost supernatural to people who are still trapped in automatic reactions. This is why Montaigne wrote, "The most certain sign of wisdom is cheerfulness." Not because wise people are always happy, but because they have developed the capacity to find something worthwhile. In whatever circumstances they encounter, they have learned to generate contentment from within, rather than depending on external conditions to provide satisfaction. They have discovered that the secret to a meaningful life is not getting what you want, but developing the ability to want what serves your deepest nature. And this brings us to the final and most dangerous realization of all, that once you stop trying to be happy and start trying to be authentic, you discover that authentic living is not just more satisfying than happiness seeking, it's more fun. The adventures available to someone who is not afraid of discomfort, the relationships available to someone who doesn't need to be liked, the experiences available to someone who can embrace uncertainty. These are infinitely more interesting than anything available to someone who is trying to stay safe and comfortable and perpetually happy. But this realization brings us to the ultimate question, the one that determines whether your dangerous authenticity becomes a source of genuine freedom or just another form of self-deception. And that's what we need to explore in the final part. Because the line between authentic danger and destructive rebellion is thinner than most people realize. And crossing it in the wrong direction can lead to a different kind of prison. One that's even more subtle and seductive than the happiness trap you've already escaped. You've reached the point where you understand that happiness is not the goal. Where you've seen through the illusions that keep most people running in circles. Where you've tasted the freedom that comes from not needing external validation to feel worthwhile. But now comes the real test, because this knowledge, this dangerous authenticity, can either transform you into someone genuinely powerful, or it can become just another form of ego, another way of feeling superior to others who are still trapped in the patterns you've escaped. Montaigne understood this temptation intimately, because he spent years observing his own tendency to use his insights as a way of judging others, his freedom, as a way of feeling superior, his authenticity, as a new kind of persona that was just as false as the happiness-seeking persona he had abandoned. He realized that the ultimate danger is not becoming too authentic, but becoming too attached to being authentic, turning your liberation into a new form of prison. This is why he developed what he called the discipline of beneficial doubt, the practice of questioning not just what others believe, but what you believe, not just their motivations, but your own, not just their attachments, but your attachments. He understood that the moment you stop questioning yourself, the moment you become convinced that you've found the truth while others are still living in illusion, you've fallen into a trap that's even more subtle than the happiness trap, because it feels like wisdom. True authenticity, Montaigne discovered, requires what he called the courage to remain unfinished. This means resisting the temptation to crystallize your insights into a fixed identity, to turn your authentic self into another character you perform, to use your freedom from conventional motivations as an excuse to stop growing. The most dangerous person is not someone who has found themselves, but someone who continues to discover themselves, someone who remains open to being surprised by their own capacity for transformation. This ongoing openness is what distinguishes authentic danger from destructive rebellion. Rebellious people define themselves in opposition to something. They need something to fight against in order to feel alive. But authentically dangerous people define themselves from within. They're motivated by their own values rather than by reaction against others' values. They don't need enemies to feel powerful. They don't need to prove others wrong to feel right. They don't need to tear down existing structures to build something meaningful. This difference is crucial because it determines whether your authenticity becomes a source of genuine contribution or just another form of self-indulgence. When you're rebelling, you're still trapped in relationship to whatever you're rebelling against. When you're being authentic, you're free to focus your energy on what actually matters to you, regardless of how others respond to it. Montaigne spent the later years of his life exploring this distinction through what he called the practice of useful solitude. This wasn't about becoming a hermit or avoiding human contact, but about developing the ability to be alone with yourself without needing to fill the silence with distractions, judgments, or fantasies about how things should be different. In this solitude, he discovered that authenticity is not a destination but a direction, not something you achieve but something you practice. This practice requires what might be the most dangerous quality of all, the willingness to be ordinary, not mediocre, not settling for less than your potential, but ordinary in the sense that you don't need to be special, unique, or better than others in order to value your own existence. You can pursue excellence without needing to be excellent. You can strive for growth without needing to be superior. You can live with intensity without needing to be dramatic. This ordinariness is dangerous because it makes you immune to one of the most powerful control mechanisms in human society, the need to be special. When you don't need to be the smartest person in the room, you can focus on learning. When you don't need to be the most successful person in your field, you can focus on contribution. When you don't need to be the most enlightened person in your spiritual community, you can focus on practice. But perhaps the most dangerous aspect of this authentic ordinariness is that it allows you to find genuine satisfaction in the present moment without needing that moment to be anything other than what it is. This is not the fake contentment of someone who has given up on growth, but the deep peace of someone who has learned to extract meaning from whatever circumstances they encounter. This capacity to find satisfaction in ordinary moments, to derive purpose from regular activities, to feel fulfilled without needing extraordinary experiences, is perhaps the most revolutionary quality a person can develop in a culture that profits from perpetual dissatisfaction. When you're not always looking for the next high, the next achievement, the next relationship to complete, you become economically dangerous because you stop being a reliable consumer of products and experiences designed to fill the void that authentic living eliminates. But the ultimate danger, the quality that makes someone truly threatening to systems of control, is what Montaigne called the strength to prefer truth to comfort. This means choosing to see reality as it is, rather than as you wish it were. even when that reality is inconvenient, uncomfortable, or challenging to your preferred self-image. It means being willing to change your mind when presented with better information, even when changing your mind requires admitting you were wrong about something important. This commitment to truth over comfort makes you unpredictable in the best possible way. You can't be relied upon to maintain comfortable lies, to participate in collective self-deception, to support systems that depend on willful ignorance. You become someone who can be trusted to tell the truth, even when it's difficult, to make decisions based on principles rather than politics, to choose integrity over advantage. And this brings us to the ultimate realization that Montaigne reached after decades of practicing authentic living. That the goal was never to become dangerous, the goal was to become useful. Useful to yourself by living in alignment with your deepest values. Useful to others by offering genuine presence rather than performance. Useful to the world by contributing your unique gifts, rather than conforming to others' expectations. When you stop trying to be happy and start trying to be useful, you discover that meaning is more satisfying than pleasure, that purpose is more fulfilling than comfort, that authenticity is more nourishing than approval. You realize that you've spent your entire life hungry for something that was always available, starving while surrounded by abundance, seeking externally what could only be found internally. Now, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really consider this deeply. Are you ready to stop trying to be happy and start being dangerous? Are you prepared to give up the comfortable illusions that have been guiding your choices and start living from a place of authentic purpose? Are you willing to become the kind of person who chooses truth over comfort, meaning over pleasure, authenticity over approval, even when it means walking alone for a while? If this message has resonated with something deep inside you, if you recognize the call to stop performing happiness and start living authentically, write in the comments, "I choose authenticity." Let's see how many people are ready for this transformation, ready to become dangerous in the most beautiful sense of the word. Dangerous to illusion, dangerous to manipulation, dangerous to anything that keeps you from becoming who you were meant to be. And remember, this is not the end of the journey, it's the beginning. The path of authentic living is not a destination you reach, but a direction you choose. Again and again, moment by moment, choice by choice. The danger is not in what you become, but in who you discover you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning, expectation, and the desperate pursuit of happiness that was never meant to be the goal. Stop trying to be happy. Start being dangerous. Start being you.